Hello,
Hello.
Robyn.
Hello, Stephen.
Broadcasting from Florida again. I'm in my non insecure location in my emergency,
Non-disclosed location, undisclosed location.
and my internet will be a bit patchy, but if not, I have some backups. So forgive a few freezes or pauses. So I wanted to kick off, Robyn, because I liked your piece yesterday about the McMichaels verdict. And I think it was very brave to even mention your position on prison abolition because it's always very inconvenient when it's like clearly awful people. And then
Yeah.
the question of, well, Robyn, what about serial killers, which I always call the Katie Dukakis question, not just the even
Yeah.
really important, but just when I think was it Sam Donaldson, I think, who during a
Yeah.
debate asked Mike Dukakis, um, who was I think one of the last Democrats to be opposed to the death penalty on a national platform, and said, "Well, what if someone raped and murdered Katie
Yeah.
Dukakis, his wife?" A curious question.
People, that's that was, yeah.
And like, what's his response? I was like, yes, I would kill it. I mean, he made the Democratic mistake of being too wonkish about it and not being, well, yeah, I would like to strangle this person with my bare hands, but we don't. It's not the Wild West. That's why we don't have
Yeah.
vigilante justice. But um, just if you could expand a bit on like your piece and responses to your piece and just your
So,
thoughts on this.
yeah. So, you know, that's definitely something that I very much struggle with in terms of how to cover when bad people get convicted of horrible things and then go to prison. Like I really, really struggle with that. I'm not entirely sure how to do that. I've been working on it. I keep trying sort of like different tacks. I do not believe that prison does anything good for our society at all. I don't. I haven't seen it do that. Clearly, you know, it's not doing the things that we claim it is doing. It's not keeping us safer or more safe. It's not keeping people from getting raped. It's not keeping people from getting murdered. It's not keeping anyone from doing any crimes whatsoever. And, people are like, well, then what are you going to do? Well, do other things. There are a whole bunch of things that you can do in order to like decrease, other than just like putting people in jail. Like there are in prison, there are other many alternatives. And most of the people who are in prison are not Ted Bundy. They're not these three guys. They're not, you know, crazed murderers who are just like out there, like axe murderers. I don't even know there aren't really that many axe murderers. Whoever hears about axe
Access.
murderers.
Well, as someone said, also prison itself is terrible for rehabilitation. You to
It
survive,
makes
it's
everyone
very,
worse.
it's very Lord of the Flies. So to survive
Mhm.
there, you come out pretty hardcore. So it actually makes criminals worse or takes people in a different direction. And we were discussing this before we came on. It's a very small percentage of total inmates who are in prison for murder. And when we talk about murder, what's difficult about again the McMichaels, it was filmed. They did it.
Yeah.
They clearly did it. There's no question. Meanwhile, we have people on death row where there's circumstantial cases
Oh
or
yeah.
bad
And
identifications. There's the Innocence Project, is the whole thing, and there are people who um, were in the getaway car, which I think is just psychotic that we do that. That you were in the car and someone stopped the car and committed a murder.
mhm.
Somehow you're in death row for that. You didn't even touch the gun, but you're by association. Um, Fights. So
We give
people who get in
people
fights.
sentences if they are commit a crime when they're 26 and they were in something that they thought was a gang in when they were in middle school. Like they will get that is what they will call gang related crime.
Mhm.
It's horrifying what we most of the people are not unrepentant criminals that need to be locked away from society or they're just going to go like murdering people all the time. That's not what's happening. And there are ways to deal with those people that are not just like throwing them behind bars and making them worse. It's illogical.
Mhm.
If you keep doing the same thing and expecting different results, what are you?
Yeah.
One thing that I did bring up on Twitter today is a lot of people in like the mass shootings have incredible medical debt for the rest of their lives. They
Mhm.
are like, they have to pay so much money to recover because we don't, you're a victim of crime. We'll get you justice by putting that person behind bars and paying money to put that person behind bars. But we're not going to take our tax money and use it to help you recover
Mhm.
from that gunshot wound. We're not going to do that. That's just beyond the pale. That's not how you get justice. Because it is a less satisfying thing to a lot of people than lock them up, don't drop the soap, all that. Like no one's like, yeah, get that person, a lung transplant or something. Like it's not.
Oh yeah, I mean that's fascinating. You mentioned that, and the rape jokes always bother me, but it says something that
It's jarring.
denying people liberty is not enough. That is almost, and I use the Shawshank Redemption film.
Mm-hmm.
Every prison movie at first is kind of like, hey, it's not so bad. It's like college. I get to work out. I'm like having, the lunch. I'm hanging out with Morgan Freeman. We're playing some baseball. And it's someone almost has to say, I think you need to have someone get raped to remind them that prison's bad and not cool. Even if you can't leave and you have no freedom, like you need to, the brutality of it, which should not be happening. Because when you take people into custody,
Mm-hmm.
even if they're terrible people, we've taken them into our custody. We should not, of course, permit them to be raped or murdered.
Rape is cruel and unusual punishment. Actually, like in 2013, I wrote a thing for Death and Taxes when I was working there about, hey, let's not do prison jokes because that's actually a really horrifying thing to do. And people were furious at me. They were like, how dare you take away this thing that I find hilarious and cathartic? The opinion has changed on that so much that like it actually does give me hope that people can change their mind about incarceration in general. Like, yes, there are people who still love to make the don't drop the soap jokes, and we have to kind of warn against that in a lot of our posts that involve someone going to prison, but we don't have that many of them. And that's a step. And usually when someone makes one of those jokes, even if we can't like delete it right away, other people will be like, hey, how about we don't punish people for crimes with rape?
Yeah. And let's talk about the catharsis, because I get that there's the idea of someone who's taken a loved one. You even at the best case scenario, it's like, well, do I even want Travis McMichaels, to become a better person? Like, because to live is about becoming a better person, right? And so my ability to, Ahmaud Arbery was denied the ability to grow, to process through life and change, as his mother put far more eloquently, and his loved one was far more eloquently than me, his ability to be in the world, to affect the world, to affect change. And so any of the positive things of rehabilitation in prison seems, when someone has taken that from someone else, from your loved one, seems it's not pleasant to hear. It's like, well, this person's now better, and now he's writing, now he's touring the country talking about not being a racist jerk, and you're like, I don't want, my child is dead. Like that doesn't make me feel better. And I think there is the element of catharsis. I was working on a review for the Bill Cosby documentary that Amal Bell is doing, which is very good, and it's the whole concept has been about the catharsis, and especially with very powerful people like him. So if you went to the fact of this is an 80-year-old man, we put on broadcast, we've taken away his power to do harm because he was in a position to do harm because of his power. Like people couldn't, in fear of their careers or that no one would believe them. They were in rooms with him that no one would be in now. It's like, okay, this guy we've determined is a serial rapist, awful human being. Society should shun him. He will never he will never have that celebrity that he craves, everything he wants, and he cannot do any more harm in that sense if the public as a whole agrees. But that is demonstrably unsatisfying to people. They wanted him in and God forbid, I would never challenge his victim for wanting him to die in prison.
Yeah.
But that was what the catharsis they wanted, and not certainly in a nice assisted living. They wanted him to be miserable and humiliated and broken. And I get that. So, I mean, what is your sense on that desire that we have?
I think that we can't have an actual system built into our society meant only to provide that catharsis and provide that satisfaction to people. Like, I understand wanting it. I like, everyone understands like basic human emotions where you're like, man, I really want something crappy to happen to that person who hurt me. But like, that can't be our legal answer across the board to everything. One thing that I do kind of want to clear up that I think that I think a lot of people hear prison abolition and assume, oh, so we're just going to get rid of all, like, set everyone free, get rid of all the prisons at once, and then, you know, just make murder legal. That's not really what it is. And, you know, instead of, a lot of it is taking vengeance out of the equation and looking at other ways to make victims whole again. And, you know, people laugh at concepts like restorative justice and transformative justice, or at least, like, you know, certain people do, who are jerks. But in a lot of cases, those things have been implemented and have been found to give victims a better sense of closure. Not closure, because there can never be closure, but, you know, put them on a better path, and made it so the person is less of a danger. And it involves a lot of different things, and it doesn't necessarily involve decriminalizing murder. It involves decriminalizing drug use, yes, decriminalizing prostitution, decriminalizing things that don't actually, like, victimless crimes, basically, vice crimes, and then working through that to create other avenues for people to deal with all of these other crimes. It's not like there's one solution and that's going to work for every solution. It's looking at, you know, a bunch of different tactics. Like, a lot of people are in prison because they're homeless and they can't, you know, like, or because they have mental health issues. Like, we got rid of, you know, mental health institutions, and now we just put people in prison. You know, I have an uncle who, he's not with us anymore, but he was like severely brain damaged. And, you know, we'd always joke about visiting Uncle Carmen in college. But like, the reason that he was in prison sometimes is because he had issues that had nothing to do with him being an intrinsically bad person. He was just, you know, chronically homeless. He had alcohol issues. He had a lot of issues stemming from being, like, having horrible brain damage from getting in a motorcycle accident without a helmet on when he was a teenager. Like,
we build all these
nuance. There's nuance, and focusing on building communities, focusing on putting actual money into things other than, you know, incarceration and policing are things that are going to actually improve our society as a whole, more so than just being like, and lock them up and slam the door. Like, and
yeah, I mean, and many moderate centrists, whatever term will tell, third way, what would tell you that using terms like prison abolition, defund, talking about this causes Democrats to lose elections. And as I mentioned, Michael Dukakis is often considered, like, there's a reason there's a direct line. People put the direct line between Michael Dukakis with Willie Horton, which came from originally, I believe, Al Gore's campaign. So between that and then Bill Clinton, you know, flying in to watch a mentally incapacitated person be executed with some popcorn and whatever. They see that as like, oh, that's Democrats need to show that they are hard on crime and tough, and that is what America.
What does that do? Like, what does it actually accomplish? Like, what people get so upset about defund the police. What exactly do the police do to prevent crime? Cops are not legal. Like, sorry, I'm getting a little ahead of myself verbally here. Cops do not have a legal like obligation to protect anyone from crime. That has been decided by the Supreme Court. The police, you can be like getting murdered. The police have no obligation to stop that from happening. Police show up after a crime has been committed generally. Like, there are other ways for the most part to deal with these crimes. And like, could there be, some semblance of like, peace officers where people are, trained to take care of volatile situations? Yes, I think, that would be an option. But like police walking around,
oh yeah,
I mean, terrifying and militarized is not making anyone more safe.
Well, it's the police state, and I think my own cynicism here is just that this is what Americans want. Americans and who put people in power, and if your goal is to be in power and respond to, let's say, what voters want and what the pattern of voters, there's a sense of they want catharsis, so they want punishment for the bad guys. They want they don't want redemption. They want the most brutal treatment.
But how is that making society better?
I don't disagree with that. It's just
where does it stop?
The people we have right now, the American institution seems they want that, and they want a police force that, if the police aren't, and I mean, police have done a great job with the propaganda and this stance, but if they aren't, because this happens every time, like you'll see a video and it's like, oh my god, like this like 200-pound cop broke the collarbone of a 100-pound woman for resisting, often either resisting because, if you're a woman, you have any traumatic issues, or just a human being, so a 200-pound man you don't know is not suddenly, you're not going to react to him as less of a threat because he's wearing a uniform and he's shouting at you. Like, actually, real serial killers tend to be a little bit more charming than someone yelling at you and throwing you down on the ground. But whenever you show that video, it's like, well, if we can't do this, and cops will say this all the time, if we can't do this, we can't protect you. And they look at the camera at the suburban white lady voter. We can't protect you. And as home
because that's who they're talking to. Like, for the most part, that's who the cops exist to protect. They don't exist to protect other people. I have a really hard time figuring out what it is that people think that cops do that is so wonderful. Like, I really do.
You're going to call the cops if someone stole your car or someone tried to hurt you.
No, I'm Italian. You don't call the cops, you call your uncle. But
I apologize about being, I feel, as I enter my 48th year, broken down by the sense of, after last year, and you get Eric Adams, who is a cop in New York, and that's the reaction after Black Lives Matter's protest.
Yeah. No, that was extremely.
We need more cops. And also the cops, like these so-called liberals in New York, is just like, I don't want to look at homeless people.
Yeah.
I want to get them off the subways, get it off. I want tough Giuliani style, which, and people were shocked by Adams in the sense of, how did this liberal city do this? I was like, it's not liberal. I lived there for 96 or 2011. I mean, here's the bottom line of New York, or the power brokers in New York. These are people who elected Giuliani and believe that Giuliani having cops torture poor people and minorities helps keep Times Square nice and clean and their neighborhoods like a Woody Allen film. That's what they want. They're fine with that. They are fine with that trade. And then Bloomberg, for he was mayor for almost as long as Queen Elizabeth has been on the throne. and he was there for a while. And then, so when someone thought you were going to get that, and then, de Blasio, who sort of also ran, but that we would go from that to Maya Wally, who's great, but like, yeah, that's probably not going to happen. You're probably going to get Adams, who's like a combination of Giuliani
I
and
think that we're
Bloomberg
all
in front of his name.
In general, I believe that we're all in the process of constantly learning and unlearning things. And one thing that I do want to go back to is the idea of catharsis, because I think the problem is like, how far do you take that to where it's not good for society? And I'm going to go back to Adams in a second, but the reason that we have the death penalty is because it makes people feel good. It makes people feel like, oh man, something's being done about crime. And like there are a lot of people who are for the death penalty who really don't care if people are guilty, because they believe that it, is making other people not murder other people, which is, clearly not true. So maybe we could find other ways to make people feel satisfied in general that don't involve, punishing other people.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and I say this
kind of vengeance. And,
I'm opposed to the death penalty, but I get the idea that it is for almost everything else, there is a degree of compensation that can be made. And obviously, if you kill someone, it is very hard. They feel like that is granted. The problem is the worst a crime is, then what is, it's one thing. It's like, okay, well, Bernie Madoff, you took a lot of money. We're going to take all your money and try to be good on this. But after a certain point, then it's just, you have to get in the torture business, because what is a justified response to Cosby or the McMichaels other than?
And then, you also then had, especially during the Bush administration, people being like, but these people are bad. Why don't we get to torture them? And people really feeling like, no, we'll feel better if those people are tortured. And I think that's not necessarily good for society at all. Like, it's not preventing crime. It's not preventing people from being terrorists. It's not preventing people from murdering or raping anyone. It's just making some people feel kind of better for a minute.
Oh yeah. And
I mean, sitting around all day being like, you know what? I'm having a bad day, but then I just thought of all the people in prison for petty crimes, and I feel very satisfied now. I feel okay. No one's doing that. It's a very short high. And, I think as far as New York goes, you have a lot of like, NIMBY type people who are liberal in the sense of, I am polite to Black people, but not necessarily liberal in the sense, and I know what words to use and everything, and not necessarily leftist. Like, they're like pleasant.
No, it's I have experience in New York. I just felt like, it's not a particularly liberal city or progressive city. I mean, obviously because the amount of money there, the amount of I would say it is a hard life that can sometimes make other people hard, and that can make it hard to be perhaps gracious to others. But it seems to be, you get Giuliani's, you get Bloomberg at best, and then someone like Adams, who is very reactive to, it's very easy to scare those folks. I thought it was fascinating because
people who have a lot are scared a lot of people coming for their things.
And despite the stereotypes, so you get Adams in New York, but then you get Mayor Wu and in Boston, who was, obviously, but much more progressive. And Boston has this history of racism. And
yes, it does. That is when I was a kid. So
it doesn't surprise you that it would seem to vote more, more liberal, in a more traditional liberal pattern.
So the area, we need to figure out how to bring images up. So the area of Massachusetts that I grew up in was a very, very small area. And I believe I think I showed it to you on a map once from a particular television series. But so the area that I lived was super, super, super conservative across the board, like horrifically conservative. And that's how a lot of the small towns in New England are. Boston is less so, but Boston is also super fucking racist. Like like there was, especially like, there are certain areas where, that's very much the norm. But in terms of, I don't know, like generally speaking, in terms of voting, they usually vote okay for some reason. And I'm not totally sure why that is. But also, Massachusetts voted for Mitt Romney, which wasn't great. Although the only way he could do that was by getting people health care. It's a very odd. New England is weird. It is. It's just weird. I don't like.
I like New England quite a bit. It's fascinating. I was talking to some friends about. We're planning a trip out there if all goes well. To Maine and parts, and everyone's sort of it's
don't go to
very
Maine.
white.
No,
Oregon is very white. I like Maine. It's fine. I have friends there, but the thing is, New York is very white in certain ways. It's fascinating. I've often talked about how, and it's disconcerting because if you are a person of color who's doing well, so you arrive in a city and it's like, I only have $1 in my pocket. Here I'm living in an apartment and there's a lot of people of color and so forth. To the point where I remember, I think I've told you a story. I was getting a roommate and the one lady had called and she was on the phone and did not apparently assume I was Black based on, I guess, speaking to me, and was very clearly worried that there were Black people in the building. So I was like, I guess I should probably tell you if you're worried that there are Black people in the building. It's like, well, what's the makeup of the what type of family? So what type of family? It's like, I don't know, nuclear. And so this is like the mid-90s, but it was a very, and as I started to do a bit better in New York, when I moved to a place, it would the neighborhood, the apartment building would get wider and wider, and it's that sort of inherent. New York definitely reflects that as sort of inherent white supremacy of where success is. Success is determined by proximity to whiteness. If you're at a job, to look around, if there's a bunch of Black people there, I'm not doing too well, am I? Like, I'm not bringing on big, if you look around, there's a lot of white people here. My boss I'm doing all right. Like, those are things that just screw with your head, right? But that's
absolutely.
And you can't say that maybe our society is really racist, or what just happens is it's not racist. And that's sort of the compelling of the white supremacy. It's like, you, Black person, Stephen, you are great, unlike everyone else, and that's why you're coming up here. And you're going to be the only, as I was at the last apartment I lived in New York, it's a doorman building. I was the only Black person there. And these are all folks who are liberals, but they will assume that's like but they live in a very, very white space, and they will mock areas that they'll say, oh, Iowa. It's like, well, you live in a Woody Allen movie. Like, what are you talking about? Like, the 2-mile distance to where people of color are is like, might as well be light years as far as you don't go, whatever. So I think there's a lot of places that are ostensibly liberal, like New York, that present. And so whenever there's sort of a racial uprising or something, like racial unrest,
it becomes something that is going to inconvenience them.
Yes.
Like, it's kind of a thing. Like, there are a lot of people who are very rich and therefore like a lot of, sort of get to float above everything. New laws, new everything doesn't necessarily affect them because they have that shield, they have that money. But when it does become something that affects them, all of a sudden they're like, oh no, okay, like I love totally and not mean to poor people, but let's not have any homeless people in my neighborhood because that's going to be bringing down the property value.
And folks are so afraid of AOC, I'll tell you. So I remember in New York, knowing through friends of friends, these hedge funds managers, stockbroker, these types were talking, and they were like, all the liberal credentials, despite that. But then, I don't know, people are thinking you might have to vote for Trump again. Really? Like, and this is like June of 2020, where he's killed a lot of people. like through fundamental incompetence of pandemic, and that's still up for debate. Like people trying to like, I don't know, what do we do? You know, it's like, well, I thought we Democrats had given you. We didn't go with Sanders. We didn't go with Warren. We didn't go with Harris or any scary. But we gave you Biden and safe. You have so fascist old white guy,
Nice, non-threatening white man
like
who
choose.
shares the
It's a
concerns about
very
how
hard. It's not a hard choice, and then it's like everything became about AOC of how all the power she had, and that's something I like to dwell on, because 2020 that was the big debate.
Mhm.
And I think you and I were often saying, well, no, in the best scenario where we get the Senate back, Joe Manchin's going to be running. It's going to be Joe Manchin's show, not AOC. Like, where do you get this idea? And when that
because people like to present her as a threat.
yes,
Is the thing. Like people, it's a scapegoat thing. Everyone loves a scapegoat, quite frankly.
You justify why they're voting for Trump when the reality, the choice was, okay, whatever your tax, Joe Manchin, and it turned out even Kirsten Sinema, they're not going to roll back your tax cuts. You're not like, you know, I would use the word respect, but the Marjorie Taylor Greens, the Lauren Boeberts of last year, who were all for Trump, they at least were all in on, I don't like these people, and that's why I'm voting for the people to hurt those people. They at least considered me enough to consider me a priority, rather than to be like, oh, geez, I like you, Stephen. Oh, Robyn, I like that you have bodily autonomy, but man, oh boy, if AOC talks to, maybe she'll convince Biden to raise taxes, and gee, oh no, what about me? And it's like, oh yeah, she'll be moderately inconvenienced, but yeah, I mean, my humanity, I don't want to get in the way of that, right? So it's that kind of shifts us somewhat. So Biden's been getting some heat. We're now sort of into year 3 of our pandemic, and Biden's been getting a lot of, you know, he's losing support from the left. Of course, the right hates him and blaming him for everything, for the pandemic and what's happening. I know Rebecca and I talked about, what is the CDC director saying? What are they doing? How do you? And they're in a tough position. I will say, I'm not a, you know, not to defend our CDC director, Dr. Wolanski, but I think how do you spin and say things are not on fire while acknowledging, well, not necessarily, it's not like you're saying that we want disabled people to die, which I think I've seen online or whatever, but it's, I don't know, it's not the most elegant analogy, but like in the AIDS crisis, it's one thing to sort of say, okay, as Republicans did, this is, don't worry about it because it's just this gay disease and they deserve to die. But it's another to be like, okay, well, you do not need to be afraid of this disease if you use a condom, or if you, you know, you don't need to, and that's sort of the irony, right? Like, you don't need to, you can let this kid into your school who had AIDS, and he can use your water fountain. He can like, literally, it's not airborne, and it's not. So I think it's about creating that balance.
I think people have a very hard time with learning things as they go. Like, it's not necessarily, I feel like people can't let go of the fact that, oh, well, if you said one thing last year, and then now you say that's not the exact right thing, they're like, well, that's hypocrisy. And it's not hypocrisy. It's like learning things as you go about a virus that people did not magically know everything about. You know, and it's, I don't, people need to be a little bit better at like just like rolling with new information, frankly. And I don't know how we teach people to do that, but it would be nice.
Yes, I think, you know, again, it's my own cynicism, but just the reality of the world is, we have the country, Republicans are in a very good position right now. They are overtly antagonistic of public health. They aren't suffering as a result of it. There's no, Kate Brown, for instance, can't run for re-election, but if she could, she'd be in worse shape than Kristi Noem, like, who's relatively popular in her state, despite just what an objective person would say would be a psychopathic approach to public health. Same with Ron DeSantis. He's gonna, he most likely will win. I think Republicans have even started to outpace Democrats in registration in Florida. And so they're leaning in on freedom. They're leaning in on, well, instead of the free vaccine, what about these highly expensive monoclonal antibodies? Because it's always more expensive to treat something later instead of getting it.
People don't trust. Well, a super good point that I'm going to bounce off of in a second on like a lot of stuff in general. But no, Americans have a problem trusting things when they're, free at the point of sale. They're like, oh, well, clearly something is up with that. We haven't, but if it's this crazy expensive procedure, like no matter what it is, they're like, oh no, that's fine. I'm on board. If it's an exclusive, like people like exclusivity.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've discussed that. Like, I think if the vaccine was rare, the monoclonal antibodies are rare, are hard to get. It's like, oh, it's hard to get that. And you're trying to keep it from me. But the government wants me to have the vaccine, so maybe I won't take the vaccine.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating because I think if you on social media, the part of it is very liberal. It's just saying things are kind of like, we need to shut down everything to protect the hospitals. And to the extent that would work, let's say that would work, our reality is everything, our laws, everything in our guidance requires compliance. And Republicans are overtly lawless in the sense of we don't feel we have to follow any law, respect any election outcome if we don't like it. And you have the police even saying, yeah, like this happened this summer in Oregon. There were cities, rural Republican cities run by governors. Yeah, she's put a mask mandate. I'm not going to enforce that. It's unconstitutional. And I can determine what's constitutional with my Sheriff Lobo cap on or whatever. And so and Ted Cruz was the one who, when one scofflaw in Texas was running, had opened her salon back up and her business, he went to her salon, reveled in her lawlessness, and the governor overturned, like a judge who was Black in our sense had, came down hard on her. You broke the law, blah blah blah. But the governor interceded on her behalf and so forth. So the idea that there would ever be lockdowns again, especially when there's no incentive because Trump is no longer president, it's no longer Republican president, to try to support that, means it's not going to happen. I don't know what the answer is. It's very clear, even though the Republican position is that vaccines, people are getting it even if they're vaccinated, and it's exhausting to then point out, well, then that's the difference between feeling icky for a few days and dying, which is a fair trade to me.
Yeah,
but
I would say so.
But they've been using that as proof that it doesn't work, and how dare you inconvenience unvaccinated people. The data is right there. There's unvaccinated people who are getting hit the hardest. And, it's a very almost militaristic and bad process. If you were in a school where the teacher would do something like, if one kid misbehaves, everyone is staying after school.
Yeah.
And that's the sort of militaristic thing of like the mob will police itself. It's sort of like the one person screws up, everyone else will do the code red on that one kid because you've effed me up, rather than the teacher just punishing the one kid. So it's like unvaccinated people, it's like the idea of like, oh, let's shut down everything, except the only people who would obey any sort of directive now are those who are already vaccinated, already being masked. And I get it. It's like with climate change, right? It's sort of the idea of like, oh, maybe I should get rid of all my cars, don't eat meat, recycle, do everything I can. It's like, well, that's nice, but at a certain point.
Did you say, I thought you said donate meat.
No.
Like, it was really like just like meat. Is that a thing?
And so and if you are, but 78% of the polluters are the large corporate. We have to take large action. And I get feeling so powerless that you want to do everything you can, but ultimately in a nation where, half the nation has, I don't know, you were talking about the beyond formation. There's a sense of a sort of collective madness. So what do you do with people who are collectively insane and are killing themselves? And I think I get where people are saying, okay, well, what about people who are compromised, who are children under 5 who can't be vaccinated, and people with disabilities, who etc. And I appreciate all of that. I just don't know if there's anything we could really do that would be effective. I'm all for it. It's just the reality of the world we're in now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
And yet we don't care about people with disabilities enough to have universal health care.
No. And that's the other point. It's like I think, and we've discussed this, I think, but I feel like because of that brief window when Republicans felt it was in their self-interest, we didn't know what was happening with the and if it was President Hillary Clinton, Republicans would have been terrible from day one. But here, Trump was president. There was an attempt to collectively try to address this, right? Which lasted 2 months. So not that long.
I keep saying this exactly up until they said you wear the masks to protect other people.
And now
that's so, really, that is like the exact moment when it turned, and I said, like, if we could actually like find a date, you can see like that's when all of the like anti-mask stuff started, because before that they were all about hoarding masks.
Oh yeah.
And being like, oh, like they didn't like the whole like, oh no, leave these masks for the people who really need them, because we didn't have the cloth masks at that point in large numbers. And they were like, oh no, we're going to go and buy out all of the masks.
So there was that period of where there was almost a progressive response to something, and everyone would believe that, okay, well, we can do that again. It's like, well, what you're now advocating for is similar to like whenever you have the periodic school shootings, like, will you just get rid of the goddamn guns and at least the assault weapon? Nothing happens because half the country has the shared madness and Republicans are evil. And it's like, well, I mean, oh my God, people are dying. We talk about people dying needlessly in hospitals and stress. People are dying needlessly, as you said, without universal health care for years. And then,
I find like almost everything, the United States does kind of like absurd in light of the fact that we do not have universal health care. And, people really like to make fun of us, those of us who think that is a good thing. But, we're spending trillions on wars, billions on incarceration, going back to that, just to keep people safe. But we can't get you insulin. That is a step too far, because of like ultimately, again, like war isn't necessarily about keeping people safe. Incarceration isn't about keeping people safe. Even, a lot of the, people don't necessarily care about keeping other people safe. Thus the reaction to the masks. It's all about catharsis. And I feel like Donald Trump was all about appealing to people's id. And I feel like we need to get, I don't really know like a process for doing that, but we need to get over like the whole, like, well, what is satisfying personally to us is the obvious best solution. And we need to play to that. We need to play up what makes people feel satisfied. And, part of the reason why people gravitate towards solutions that happen after the fact is because preventative shit is boring.
Oh yeah. And I'm not trying to be defeatist and not that I'm unsympathetic to issues. It's just that for me, when people tweet or pontificate about solutions, especially for what we're seeing now with COVID or Omicron, that's in denial of the fate of the shape of the world. I don't know, well, how, like, okay, we could fix climate change. We could fix a lot of things if we, that would have far less impact than saying you can't go to a restaurant anymore you can't get, like the idea of like, oh, you need to strict gatherings and it's like, okay, well, you understand that unvaccinated people, it's actually worse if they're not in a public park or public space, especially like in Florida where it's somewhat sunny. If they're in their homes and spreading it, that's even worse. It's like, well, we need to restrict. It's like, okay, well, DeSantis is not going to do that. And even in any quote unquote liberal state, the police, who are you going to call? That you're talking about the police. The police have demonstrated from the start, like, and that's the discussion we don't have, that we should have, but instead the response is to just genuflect to the police, right? So after
it's like genuflecting to the troops, like, oh, what, you don't love the troops? You don't want them to die unnecessarily in a war?
They won't get, when they were saying, well, we'd rather quit than get vaccinated. But you before would say, oh, so you'll defund yourself over vaccination. But when, Robyn or someone's talking about slightly altering your budget, she wants people to get raped in the streets. You apparently don't care because you want to be vaccinated. And then they say, we won't enforce the law if we disagree with it, which is completely a police state. But what was revealed, and that was revealed last year, when they were like, yeah, we're not going to enforce a mask mandate. We're not going to, without enforcement, what do you have? And I've written about this to the extent of the law for years has been about containing, in certain ways, marginalized people conditioned to be contained.
Yes.
So to a certain degree, and despite all the stories conservatives will tell you about Black people, we are conditioned to follow the law. We understand the full hammer on it that will happen.
Because you're more likely to be affected by it.
Exactly. So when you have the Karen freakouts and all of that, that they were saying at the, over mask and that sort of, they understand that no cop's going to shoot them because they made a fuss about putting a mask on, even though Eric Garner was choked to death over, loose cigarettes. That's BS, right? How many Black people have been killed for like talking back to a cop? Whatever happened to Sandra Bland is no worse than like some lady being like, why would I wear, here's my natural immunity. I'm not wearing a mask. And the idea that she would die as a result of that. Yeah, she does not, it's not in her mind. And the police not only are
they actually also use the language of compliance so much in terms of police brutality. They're like, well, if they just complied, they would have been alive, which is like, most of the time not actually true at all. But now they're like, oh no, they're expecting compliance from me. And they're obsessed with the word compliance in the other way, in the other direction. They're very surprised to find that anything, if like, usually it doesn't, but if anything does apply to them, they're shocked by it. Like the insurrectionist people being surprised to find out that you can remain in prison without being convicted of something. Like they can't believe that happens.
Oh yeah. And yeah, like this law applies to people.
That's different.
Well, yeah, like people who were wandering through the Capitol and the idea that they like were free to do that, as opposed to, when and Republicans have talked about the riots and the unrest in Wisconsin and Minnesota during the summers, and it was like, if people had just like stormed a CVS, like these people get shot, like. And especially the cops said, ask them to leave, and they didn't. So it's a fascinating sense of the entitlement, what they're expected to do, and at the end, and the cop mentality won't change, even though Republicans know we don't have to show up for the moment of silence with these Capitol officers. Trump doesn't have to make a statement. Cops died. Cops are almost lynched. Doesn't have to make a statement. And he knows if I run again in 2024, I'll still get every police union endorsement. I'll still get all the support, even though I backed, as you described, a domestic terrorist, Ashley Babbitt, over a cop. And every Democrat, in a certain way, like the minorities who have been conditioned to comply, conditioned to survival, they operate in the same way, right? The idea of like, I could never do that. It's over. If I did not state, oh my God, you never should have done that, you're done. You're politically done. But Republicans know it's like, yeah, we can get through
Because
this.
in their minds, they're not used to that kind of thing happening to them.
Mhm.
It seems natural to them for it to happen to Black people, but oh my God, a white woman got shot by the police just for trying to like claw her way into Congress. That's like a hate crime. And they were horrified by that. And yet they cannot manage to transfer that thinking to like, oh, this happens to people all of the time. I wonder, are they mad about it in the same way that we're mad about it? And it's like they cannot make that connection at all. And it's astounding. Like it's what I do find very interesting is the amount of shot, like when, like a lot of the shit that has happened to the January 6th people, there's so much of it where they're like almost using a lot of the same language that the left uses in terms of being horrified by police murdering people and the way that bail works and putting people in jail who haven't actually been convicted of anything, and they're like, oh my God, how
Oh yeah,
how can you do this to people?
I've
They
described Matt Getz and Marjorie Taylor Greene as sort of bizarro world Jesse Jackson and Maxine Waters. You imagine a sense of their showing up and say these people have been unjustly in prison. We're going to do something about it and whatever. And that's how they're doing it, which is so un-Republican, right? And
yeah, they're going against their own general beliefs in order to protect their base, which is
because they are consistent with the belief, which is white supremacy. And since
absolutely,
Democrats can identify that, you wind up with these tweets from Democrats I like otherwise, Swalwell, Schatz, and Chris Murphy, but because they can't identify the literal elephant in the room, right? They're in this sense of, what, this is so inconsistent. Or same with like, wait a minute, you made up this rule to block Garland, and now you're going to run in through Barrett, but that's so as if it's like, no. We had power, we used our power. We support our people, we don't support your people.
Yeah.
We've been very consistent. And that's what's so fascinating, because those two guys
rule is white supremacy. Like that's
and so if Maxine Waters, because before 2018, before the squad relieved her as inconvenient Black woman, if she or Jesse Jackson or anyone had been defending minorities who they believe were unjustly imprisoned and all those sort of stuff, you would, as much as white male pundits keep talking about Biden doing a sister soldier moment, what they don't say is, because all that means is beating up on a Black woman or punching down or white men
had no actual positive effect on Clinton's candidacy at all. Like it literally did not.
No. It was like George Bush effed up and his taxes pledge and the economy was bad. But I think people focus on that because of the sense of reestablishing a racial hierarchy.
And it goes into the sense of satisfaction.
I will control the folks in the plantation. They give us the votes, but I control them. And
won't let them get too far. Like
exactly. And especially and to a big
function of the police.
And no one says there needs to be, people lament that McCarthy and others won't have their, because there is no such thing as a soldier moment for Boebert or Marjorie Taylor Greene, because there's no concept of that, and they understand that we can't keep them down. They run the show. They are the ones in control, and they are everyone who. So, I mean, that's the clear difference, is that Greene reflects, and even now people are still, if I joke and say Speaker Marjorie Taylor Greene, there's still this idea that she's too too uneducated, too stupid,
Mhm.
too whatever, there's still this dream of, oh, well, the one we really have to worry about as Democrats is Nikki Haley, or what. It's like, just no, no,
Yeah.
no. How many times, your dream celebrity dream crush Republicans keep losing? Romney lost, McCain lost.
Yeah.
Ones who you were the most
Like laughing at and could never win, starting
kind of.
from Reagan, at least. Like,
Oh yes, I'm sure with Reagan, there was a room and people were talking about bedtime for Bonzo and whatever,
oh,
and
absolutely. No, like
talking
my
about it.
parents have told me that this was a thing. My
Mhm.
mom was like one of the only people who was like, no, he's gonna win. Just watch. He's absolutely gonna win because I know how people are, and
Mhm.
people are terrible. Like,
Oh, and 2000 definitely, I'm sure. And the
oh yeah,
DLC
everyone's like, he's
never.
a
There's like,
pro.
woo,
I would vote for
Bush
him.
beat McCain. Woo, we were worried McCain would have been, because I felt like that was the idea. Oh, McCain would definitely be a problem for us. Thank God it's Bush, and then Bush, of course, won. So
Well,
I
I feel
think.
like a lot of Democrats in general have like a very weird class problem almost, like in a way that oddly enough Republicans don't always have. Like there's like
Mhm.
they can't possibly imagine someone who isn't, an esteemed statesman attracting other people. And it's this extreme blindness that exists where they can't even wrap their heads around, oh, people would like George W. No one would like George W. Bush. Of course they like Al Gore. He's classy. George W. Bush was a Yahoo and
Mhm.
a cokehead, and no one would vote for him. And I thought that. I was shocked, and my mom was like, "Oh no, absolutely, he's getting elected." And I was like, "That is not happening. You are
Oh yeah.
crazy." And she was
He
like,
was,
"Watch."
he was
She's like,
certainly, to the extent that it's all about the personal, he was certainly more compelling than Gore in many ways.
"Yeah,
And I think it's part of what learning. I think one unfortunate case, because we are losing with the embrace of the never Trumpers, we're losing a
mhm,
lot of the working class, and it's slow and steady, because of the sort of, um, we are this clubbishness of being a
mhm,
Democrat, no outsiders and whatever. Whereas Republicans, since the Tea Party, the sense of outsiders have been winning, which creates
yeah."
a sense of, if you're not part of the man, you can be in the Republican Party. The Democratic
Yeah.
Party is the party of the man, quote unquote.
Well, I feel like the Democratic Party is very excited to be the man sometimes, and I'm like, "No, that's not actually what you want." And also it's not true.
Yeah, and not to the last thing I want to do is relitigate 2016. It just seems to me the unfortunate result of it is, I feel, in 2008, if Hillary Clinton had beaten Obama, it would not have been scorched earth on hope and change. I would think it would have been, oh well, maybe our VP should be someone young and hip, maybe a minority, or maybe here's what we can do, here's what we can learn from this campaign that excited people. And
Mhm.
I think that for whatever reason, and even if I presume from the standpoint that Sanders pissed off everyone and
Yeah.
deserved every Democrat to hate him, whatever, there was a sense of, we are responding as if that campaign never happened.
Well,
And
also again,
we're going to choose Tim Kaine. We're going to choose Tim Kaine as if we didn't run, we weren't upset in Michigan. Because how does Tim Kaine fix having been upset in Michigan, right? Like, how does, like, whatever's happening, when there's a clear sort of, that it goes back to Occupy, right? There's
yeah.
clear populist building that people denied, even though denying the strength of, um, Donald Trump's populist connection. They were just denying it and responding to it by like,
It's
oh,
if you ignore it, it will go away thing that some people just really love. And I think, we've discussed this a lot of times, but like in light of the other conversations that we've been having today, a lot of it was, well, no, the Bernie people need to be punished. They need to be put in their place and punished. And, so they can be out and think about the wrong that they've done. And they need to they need a timeout. And I think a lot of that was about, sort of capturing the, that level of satisfaction from people, and that catharsis, and that kind of like, because people were a little bitch eating crackers in that way.
And it's
like they were,
unfortunate.
Bernie people must be punished. They must be like beaten down and destroyed for their transgressions.
And I feel like that's where it's unfortunate, because I think we're going to still see a decline amongst Latino voters, especially working class Latinos, who do not, for now, the Democratic Party has been coasting, I would say, on a support of Black people because of they've been our team for so long, right? And so they have that support. For Latinos, they didn't have that sort of ancestral Democratic support. You compellingly make that case. You can't sort of take that for granted. And I feel like if you keep chasing the never Trumpers and the suburbanites and the well-educated people who, as we saw in Virginia, can still flip on you, you start losing that aspect. And we're still chasing the idea of, that Pete Buttigieg is so smart and speaks 7 languages. I like the guy, he's fine, but it's like it is still a sense of, we don't want the working class person who maybe is too animated with his hands and the way they talk, or is a little too angry. And meanwhile, and I get that. I mean, and beyond Sanders or Warren or whatever, it's in AOC, you still see that, of course, of looking at Boebert and Getz and Green and saying, oh, I don't like them, and you shouldn't. They're terrible. So I'm going to, everything about them is wrong. So the solution is someone who is totally the complete opposite of them, which again, you need to recognize. To beat your enemies, I think you need to recognize what they do well.
And see their strengths.
How are they charismatic in certain ways? How are they connecting with their supporters, and to do more of that? And I think that's been the struggle. Wild transition, but slightly lighter note. It is Kate Middleton's, or the Duchess of Cambridge, her 40th birthday today. So how are you celebrating the future Queen's 40th birthday?
This is going to go in the Sex and the City and the West Wing list, and Friends.
List. I mean, this is our oldest.
I have my knowledge of the royals is like absolutely nothing. I can tell you anything about the Romanovs and Russian imperial history, because that's actually interesting. But and I did have some really great pajamas at one point featuring Queen Elizabeth, and I did love them. But other than that,
well,
I have no. Are you celebrating this in some capacity?
No, our YouTube still is of Betty White, so I'm still trying to adjusting of a world about Betty White. But the Queen is mortal, right? So will be 96 this year. At some point, she will no longer be with us. But then that would mean the King, Prince Charles, who is universally kind of reviled. I mean, it's not particularly very popular, but the Queen, the Prince, will be the King, would be in his mid 70s. So, to me, I find that a weird time to get this new job. It's like, I retire, but he can't. So he's got to be king for a while. And he could live as long as his parents, who were in their late 90s. That's another thing. So then, Will and Kate would be in their 60s, and this would happen. And it's just this ridiculous kind of.
I mean, I think the existence of a royal family is completely absurd to begin with. I don't
I feel like it's something that just won't. It's part of me that's hard to imagine it continuing after Queen Elizabeth. It's sort of okay, well,
I don't think anyone
she knew Churchill, right? So she's this institution of Churchill, lived through the war and everything, and then everyone else is kind of I guess why is this a thing? I feel like no one's gonna really care when Charles is king. Why would that mean anything? So I feel like it's one of those things that people would just maybe stop doing, right? Maybe it would just be the Queen is dead, and we are no longer have a we no longer have a royal family. But maybe before you do it, Kate released her 40th birthday pictures, and she's like, I can't wait until I'm queen to sort of flip the song.
Now I feel like that Lion King, yeah. Oh, that's what you're referring to. Okay.
Well, it's the guy from Pitch Meeting said, it's like, it's a weird song to sing. You know, you have a whole number about can't wait till your dad dies.
I know. That's super weird. Yeah, no. Oh my God. That never even occurred to me.
And the dad comes in during the number. It's like, oh, it's really sad.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Like, I have to tell you, this absolutely never occurred to me in like the many times I definitely saw The Lion King as a kid, and then also the Broadway production, because, you know, I have my tendencies. Sorry, that never even occurred to me.
No, I mean, The Lion King, I think, is also part of conditioning a generation to, you or someone that posts, like, we are always kind of instinctively defending wealthy people, the rich people, the powerful, in the same way of just like,
because we assume that it protects us on some level, but it really doesn't.
Yes, you know, their reign of terror of the lions, which is idea of like, oh, it's a circle of life, whereas we will live and enjoy our lives, and then when we die and become dirt, that will lead to something that's like, but we can kill any of you at any moment. It's like, well, that's not quite a good deal, but it's similar same way with like how we explain capitalism and how that works, which is just, you know, and we believe there's no better way. This is the only way.
Like, I just, you know, to quote every ad seen on TV ad, there's gotta be a better way. Like, if something doesn't work, find other ways to do it. I don't understand why that's like, you know, so incredibly bonkers. Oh, by the way, I would just like to say, choreographer of The Lion King on Broadway was Rochester's own Garth Fagan, and I did take dance classes with him. Still didn't know
that. That's impressive. So, do you ever watch Finding Your Roots, the show, hearing Louis Gates? Or
yes. His daughter, by the way, is like awesome, and I haven't talked to her in years, but she is a sweetheart.
That show often, and this is nothing about Gates, but it's interesting of how it is that same thing of where a lot of stories about life, it's like, oh, you know, you get the celebrity or the famous person now, and usually for people who grew up poor or minorities, it's like, here's how terrible your ancestors' life was, but now you're in this popular sitcom and everything's great. They were suffering for you, and it's like, there's awful, like, if you look at the poor, right, the peasants and whatever, like, it's terrible. You look at these lives of just, oh my God, this back-breaking, horrible labor, and they're wealthy people who are profiting from this, right? And that we should be angry about that. And instead of this person who's like carrying 100 pounds of, you know, whatever, and they do that, and then they die, and the idea, but we are conditioned to believe that this all builds up to you and I, whatever success we have, and then we go back, oh, thank you. And it's like, well, I would rather not be very wealthy, and just that everyone kind of, every generation
have people be basically okay. I feel like we have put such value in misery. Weirdly, I'm not trying to get off track here, but this goes back to a thing that I was weirdly tweeting about last night, which is, you know, this, like, the British Tommy Lahren was very upset about, did you see what it was like, in an mannequin,
how dare a large person have a clothing that
wear exercise gear? Why won't they just be thin automatically? And I absolutely do feel like there's a lot of the anger that people have towards body positivity and like, oh no, like beautiful at any size and everything like that, is that they're like, excuse me, I tortured myself for years to be this thin. I didn't eat things. Why, like, where is my reward? And I'm not going to get my reward for that if other people just get to go and, you know, look normal and have normal lives. Like, that's, and it's this anger about that. There's so much anger about people love this idea
minimum
of
wage or any type of growth. It's
yeah.
like I succeeded without, and I think that's just a type of human being you are, right? And I've always liked, I would read, whenever you read in a certain golden age celebrity bios, and it would be similar, like someone
Yeah.
dirt poor going, but then the one
Joan Crawford.
who's later a Democrat would be, that sucked. No one should live this way.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna use my wealth and fame to
Mhm.
help those people. And the certain person with the same lifestyle, Barbara Stanwyck, who I always love, but
Yeah.
would it be, I made it, and everyone else can make
No,
it.
I hate her politics, but I love her otherwise so
She's
much.
wonderful. We love we love her evil villains, and she was great in the Thornbirds. But
Yes.
I'm not gonna. That's
Stella
another
Dallas
time.
also is my favorite. I'm like, I have opinions on Barbara Stanwyck. Who would like to hear them?
That's another. We could do a whole hour on Barbara
I
Stanwyck.
know.
That will be a special maybe the
Yes.
Valentine's Day episode. So, but yes, this idea of I only do this. So, because a lot of it's BS, right? Like for some people it's like exercise, eating clean, as they like to call it, to because it's the new religion, right? Like it's like it's associating all your religious stuff to food, and
it becomes a moral judgment.
So a moral judgment, but all of that is not for your own sake of feeling, okay, I do this for myself and I feel fine. It's like, no, it has to matter. It has to be that this is the best way to be. I've achieved that, because if I haven't, then why did I punish myself? It's not enough that I am happy. I'm only happy if others are unhappy. And that is sort of an unfortunate American concept. I mean, not American, but here, because we're just in England, but it's a sense of, if someone, it's like they say, it's like they always make the comparison. Well, why should this person making my food make $15 an hour or whatever, when this, always try to find something of value of like someone that's like, okay, well, you eat a lot. So I would like to think that the people who provide
bring this to you can like earn a living wage. Like, it's completely absurd to have like such this. It's just this anger that people have over how dare people not suffer the appropriate amount that I feel like they should suffer. And it's for, they didn't go to college, then they need to suffer more in order to prove that they are of value.
See, essential workers, that was also the 2-month period where there were the wonderful essential workers who allowed us to function. Like, you were able to get diapers for your kids. You were able to get,
should they be able to make a living? Not sure about that.
And all those people who help society function at the end of this gain nothing. At best, they just didn't sink further into poverty. But despite their heroic efforts, came out no better. Whereas, like, again, the billionaires like Musk and others have done tremendously better. And again, I've seen online people, well, Musk isn't literally the devil. Okay, that's great. To defend him, but
no one is literally the devil, because the devil does not exist.
But can we at least after a year be like, what? I mean, he's obviously exploiting him, Facebook, Bezos. They exploited all this labor and literally shot up in the moon with it. And instead of being like, hey, why don't we just give? And we're talking about lifestyle altering funds. That's what's so scary, right? You think about someone who has billions. They could just be like, what level could they give back to their own employees, not to everyone, just their own employees at Amazon who are working in those insane
or
conditions.
At the very least, let them have bathroom breaks.
Like, you don't have to work anymore. You don't. Here's your X amount of money. You don't have to. Maybe you want to. Your life will be, and it's not about they would not work anymore. It's more about you would not have to fear the wolf at the door as much. But we just kind of
it's like we fetishize the idea of people like living by the skin of their teeth. and being miserable, and and then their only satisfaction is that other people get to go to jail for various crimes. Like that's
Well,
how we do it. And then
it's supposed to become a bio, right? It's
that's
supposed
what
to,
you get.
it's like Marco Rubio or any, it has to be a bio for a politician about their mother working at in a hotel, cleaning as a, doing domestic work, backbreaking labor, hard all their life. And then now their son can now do this, or their child is now in a profession. But it's just, again, why does it have to be that this human life must suffer? Unfortunately, not suffer this way. But a lot of the idea of we want our children to do better than we do, but at certain, at least it's kind of like, I didn't want my parents to be miserable. Just that to me isn't a good idea. So that's an unfortunate kind of thing. And yes, like, why wouldn't we design clothing for all sizes, all shapes? Why
like
can't
those people? What do we want? Do you want them to walk, or do you want people to walk around naked and like, or hair shirts only? That's all you get, hair shirts only.
Well, I've often said that a lot of clothing for large women decades ago when I was growing, it felt like demonstrably terrible.
Oh yeah, like it was a punishment.
Dress,
and there were people who actually, like, for a long time got furious over crazed over the idea of there being, cuter clothes for people who were over a size 10. Like they were like, this is just going to encourage obesity. Everyone's going to run out and eat 12,000 Twinkies right now because you made a cute top that fits a normal sized human person. And it's just, it's bizarre. I feel bad about this in retrospect, but I worked in boutiques that would literally hide everything over a size 10 in the back room so as not to encourage people over a size 10 to shop there.
Yeah.
Like we'd have a few things, but they'd all be in the back secretly, hidden away. It was disgusting.
You didn't want poor people there. You didn't want, everything's about exclusivity, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that people have a certain feeling about, oh no, if fat people are okay, then I'm not in my own exclusive club and I'm not special anymore. If anyone can buy this shirt, then it's not special. And it's a pretty fucked up way to be. Like
the whole bikini body thing, right? Like,
that was hard.
Going outside. If I want to go outside,
bikini body, as long as you can literally fit into a bikini, which not everyone can all of the time, which is unfortunate, because for a long time we did not make clothes that fit people, which is just it's so bizarre. It's so bizarre because I've been like every single size in my life, and it's all a bad time. Like there's literally no size to be as a woman that is a good time for, buying clothes and wearing clothes and being a human and not feeling like shit about yourself. Like there's no amount of thing you can be that is ever going to be like, congratulations, you did it. You have like succeeded at womanhood. You're okay now. Like you're still fucking up somewhere. So better, we're horrible to people. We're horrible. Like
you can help feeling complicit in it if you're someone like myself who grew up like, enjoying fashion since in the movie. It's like, oh, look at this great outfit that Ginger's wearing, and later Audrey and Marilyn and all this sort of design. But yes, like you have to be a certain way for those things to have worked. And in my sense, it's like, okay, well, let's include everyone, and we can figure out how to make every, there's not only one.
I want everyone to look great. Like I love fashion so much. And I want everyone to be able to enjoy that, including myself, because I am clearly not a size 0. Like it's such a cool thing, and it's a form of art. And the fact that people would be like, I want to take that away from people because they have not done what I think they need to do in order to like earn a fucking exercise outfit. Is like truly it's so sad. I can't imagine being like that. Like I can't imagine that particular feeling. It's just so you must feel bad all of the time is all I can say.
Yes. So what do you have going on for this week, or any?
Well, we're going back to Rochester this week. So gonna be cold again. Also, I'm very excited. Tonight is Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, which is one of my favorite shows. Right now, like I realized, like people in the comments have been like, "Oh my god, how can she watch that crap? It's so like stupid." But you know, I'm not really psychologically in a place right now where I can handle anything beyond like extremely trashy reality TV, where like, you know, nothing really
I
like
don't
that
question
happens.
I don't question anyone's what brings joy to anyone's life. Apparently,
Yeah.
Andy Cohen's involved in that. He was on the Finding Your Roots show. I guess he is the
Yeah.
guy who, when not drunk on CNN, was doing some of the Real Housewives. So it all
Yeah.
comes together. Well, thank you so much. It was a pleasure chatting with you as always, and we will look forward to
Yes.
next week. Thanks everyone for being
Bye.
in.
Thank you for joining us.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.